Good evening, everyone. We have one member online tonight, but the rest in the room. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Guildford Borough Council and Waverley Borough Council Joint Executive Committee. We have two co-chairs for this. Myself, Councillor Paul Follows, leader of Waverley Borough Council, and off to you.
Councillor Julia McShane, leader of Guildford Borough Council.
Thank you. The meeting is being held in the council chamber here at the Berries in Godalming and is being webcast live. The agenda was published on Monday, the 5th of January 2026 for both authorities. Item 1, apologies. Barry, can you advise of any apologies from either council?
Yes, we have 3 apologies tonight. We've got councillors Kyla Mawson, Phil Bellamy and Fiona White.
And for everybody's assurance, there's nothing going wrong in Ash. That's 3 completely different reasons. And I think Angela Goodwin is joining us online as well to confirm. Yes. Right. Okay. Item 2, the minutes. Can I have your agreement for the minutes of the 4th of December 2025? Can I have all those in favour please show or say agreed? Either one. Thank you. Item 3, declarations. Any declarations from any exec members prior to the meeting? Okay, seeing none. And before I move to item 4, we have a couple of new faces. So I want to, obviously, from this perspective, welcome Councillor Juice, who's joining us now as our new portfolio holder for environment. I believe also at Guildford, the environment sustainability portfolio has now been unified to be the same as the Waverley one and sits with Angela. Yep. And also to welcome Councillor Vanessa King, who is the new deputy leader of Guildford Borough Council as well. So welcome, Vanessa.
Is the lead member for economy in place?
And lead member for economy in place. My apologies for not remembering that myself. Right, in which case then we go to item 4, the EDI strategy report, which is with Julia to introduce, I believe.
Is it?
I believe so, and if not, myself or Kika can do it. Kika will do it. All right, after you, Kika.
Thank you. This is the combined equality, diversity and inclusion policy for Waverley and Guildford. The strategy outlines how we are committed to working together in an environment of harmony, fairness and respect. Its aim is to give equal opportunity to all so that each one can succeed to the best of their ability, thus enabling our council to function effectively for the people we serve. I am aware that EDI in some corporations, however laudable in their outlook, has not been fair to all those who have worked under its aegis, unwittingly creating division and resentment. Our strategy, I believe, has been careful not to fall into that trap, but offers the benefits of a framework to those who work in and for our administration, avoiding those traps. I'm also pleased to advise we will have 6 monthly assessments to see how it is working out, which will be discussed by a newly formed EDI group. And I'd like to say thank you to Claire for the report.
Thank you very much, Kika. Anybody else want to add any comments on this item? Adam?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to also commend this policy. This is an area close to my heart, as well as the environment. And indeed, I think in the broader context where some would argue, the need to look at this and provide such a policy and invest in this area in local authorities across the UK, it's quite clear that there is, underrepresentation of certain groups, and trying to make sure that as many different voices are heard, not only from a councillor perspective, but also from the officer teams that work with councillors is really important.
Thank you, Adam. And my apologies, I haven't come to Councillor Hyman, who has requested to speak. Jerry, welcome again back to this one. And you've got 3 minutes in this committee under these rules, just to remind you. So after you, Jerry.
I didn't know that. Thanks for the reminder. Yes, turn to page 11 of your documents in front of you, members. The other key risks, and I'm sure that you've read them, but those of you who haven't had a chance should have a look at the key risks of increased conflicts and communication barriers, sort of thing that Councillor Miralles mentioned and said that we're doing something about and should be better than others. Resentment and backlash, stuff, feel that initiatives are unfair, that sort of thing, and people may feel devalued, perception of tokenism, etc. 10.6 says we're mitigating the risks described thereby. 10.7, validating staff's feelings. Well, I don't think that's going to help. Instead of dismissing resistance, we're going to acknowledge and validate the emotions of those who are resistant to help moderate their efforts. I'm not going to pretend I know what moderating efforts means, but I'm sure somebody out there knows what it means. I think that really those sentences there tell me what I really need to know here, that people are going to be told that they're wrong, and that's not going to help at all. 10.9, we're going to use data to measure the true impact. This is what I'm really aiming at here, because I try to concentrate on good decision making. It says here we're going to track metrics beyond simple representation to understand the real impact of the initiative. If that's the case, have we done that already? Because there are no metrics whatsoever. If you read pages 35 to 40, the delivery plan, there are absolutely no metrics, no standards, no measurable things by which we can track this. If we can, why haven't we done that? Because we've had a policy for a number of years now. In different iterations. So, I mean, really, we've got EDI laws that apply, and we've got quite a powerful union to represent our members and to ensure compliance with the laws that apply. Without measurable targets, we'll never be able to answer the question of what benefits the council and residents get. And I think that, in the coming weeks and couple of months, we're going to be getting questions, possibly from reform candidates, saying what good, not what have Romans done for us, but what good is this doing, and why are we spending money on it? And we need to be able to back that up, and we need metrics. We need to be able to tell people how this is benefiting us above what people, the protections people have already got. So, in terms of good decision making, value for money for our residents, can you please explain what metrics we're going to go for? Because when it was brought up at the overview scrutiny, we were simply told that the metric is going to be staff of the feedback from staff surveys, and those surveys, when questioned.
Thank you, Jerry. That's your time.
There were going to be there wasn't going to be any anonymity in those surveys, so they're going to be meaningless. Right. Thanks very much, but that's the issue here.
Thank you, Jerry. So speaking in my capacity as also one of the two portfolio holders for HR at Waverley, firstly, when we do staff surveys, there's always anonymity. That has to be done, otherwise we don't get responses, and staff quite reasonably don't fill them out if there's no anonymity. In terms of measurable targets, I would just refer you to page 35 right to the end, from page 35 right to the end of the document, that talks about some of the things that we'll be measuring on this. But EDI as a concept is one that is evolving all the time, and has certainly evolved since we did our original version of this policy, and is something that we've been keen to ensure that we develop with our staff and not just onto them. In terms of any political commentary, I'm sure that there will be those of us in this room that have to stand up to those people that don't think being reasonable and compassionate and sensible to our staff is a thing that benefits residents ultimately, which of course it does, because of course happy, motivated staff in an organisation are far more likely to do work that benefits residents than those that are not, and that's assuming that they even stay in such an organisation. And bearing in mind retention in local government is already an issue. This is obviously one, I think, that contributes to the retention of staff in the long run also. I've got a couple of people who flagged to speak, as I'm not, which I certainly expected, and that's starting with Vanessa.
Thank you, Councillor Follows, and thank you, Councillor Hyman, for raising such important points. Councillor Follows has mentioned a couple of the things I was going to say, but I would just emphasise that a policy on EDI tells something about who we are and what we think is important. So while people are covered under legislation, I think an explicit policy for any workplace, including local government, says something about who we are and what we think is important. And so I think given the limited cost, I don't know if it actually costs anything apart from staff time, that the positive working environment that it creates, I think it's a really important step and one that we should all embrace. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in the Chief Executive, who I think wanted to say something as well.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be honest, you covered pretty much all the points I was going to make, but I did just want to add the point that you employ a head of paid service, that's me, to try and part of my role is to ensure that our staff work as hard as we can and and as effectively as we can for the benefit of the residents and businesses of Guildford and Waverley. And part of my judgment, as well as the judgment of our HR leaders and our broader senior leaders across the organisation, supported by the conversations we've had with both staff and the management cadre, is that everybody welcomes this, and actually the ability to bring your whole self to work is a huge motivating factor for staff, as well as a huge recruitment and retention factor. And I would just add that that is also accords with my experience. So regardless of any of the politics in this, I will just note that we get a better result in terms of recruitment, retention and effectiveness of staff by moving forward with this, and that's supported with a broad range of wider research. I would just support Paul's point that we do regular staff surveys now. They are entirely anonymous and carried out by an external body in order to ensure that anonymity, and that will give us the rich response rates and KPIs and metrics that Councillor Hyman alluded to. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor George Potter is also on there, and just so you're aware, I'm aware that you have also registered to speak, and I will bring you in after my current set of speakers, starting with Muriel.
Thank you. I was just going to be very brief. I think this report is very commendable. Issues run in my family, so it is lovely to see something where you go above and beyond the stigma and people are able to be themselves and be supported and therefore work the best that they can. Thank you.
Thank you, Muriel. Julia.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, this is a really important strategy because staff are our best asset. And as has already been said, they're the ones that deliver our corporate strategies and do the work and provide services to our community. And I think it's really important as well to remember that, as has already been said, it's really important for people to bring their whole self to work, and also that we support them. And it's part of our requirement, really, to make sure that there's a positive culture for everybody as part of our councils, because that's one of the requirements or one of the things that makes up our statutory best value duty. So this is really important, and I really welcome this. And yeah, we're all going to support it, obviously.
I should hope. I think, George, I've got you next. I will just say, if in future you can register to speak for this committee, I'm obviously not going to be a pedant on the rules right now, but as it's a new committee, but in future, can you please register in advance? So, George.
Thank you. I will note that I did email the Democratic Service Office at Waverley in advance of this meeting, but did not receive a response. But yeah, I'll certainly try to register earlier in the future. Also, I'm afraid I'm going to turn my camera off just because it appears to be misbehaving. I just wanted to comment on this item as another member of the joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which considered this report before it came here. And I think it is worth noting that the overwhelming view of that committee was that we felt this was a very sensible and timely piece of work, and that overall the committee was very firmly in support of it. I will note that Councillor Hyman expressed the same concerns almost verbatim there that he has today, but it was very much a minority of one on that topic. And I think if I'm starting to notice any particular theme on this topic is that Councillor Hyman has a lot to say on this topic, but doesn't necessarily appear to have read the papers in full. And I think it's also worth noting that one other issue that has came up at the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee is that doing nothing is not a valid option, given that, amongst other things, we do have a public sector equality duty as two sets of councils, and we do need to have a policy in this area. And so doing nothing, as has been suggested, is definitely not a viable option, and that was certainly the overwhelming view of the relevant scrutiny committee when we considered this item, and I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, George. I'll go a little bit further than that, and I would also say that as much as we have statutory duties to meet. I think there are a number of us in this room that don't think the current statutory minimum is sufficient. And so actually we need to go a little bit further than that in how we run our organisation. And I think this policy does that. And very much thanks to Claire and the team for the work that they've done to get this forward to where it is. Are there any other speakers in the room? Adam.
Sorry, me again. I just wanted to challenge a point that Councillor Hyman mentioned about this rather prescriptive attitude of getting it right or wrong. It's not about that. And in fact, there are obviously differences of opinion within every protected characteristic and every grouping. It's about discussing these differences without emotion. And I think that line that was taken out, 10.6, is a key point there. So, you know, if one has an emotional response to something, why do they do that? And for me, it's about making sure, as was stated by Councillor King, that it's about the culture that is set and that you can bring your authentic self to work. There's also a lot of evidence and database metrics on page 13 and 14, which again link into the targets that were a source of concern from Councillor Hyman.
Thank you very much, Adam. It's very clear. Any other comments before I move it to the recommendations? Okay, seeing none. So are the recommendations set up in the report at agenda item 4 agreed? Thank you. Very good. Right, moving then on to internal carbon pricing. Obviously there's been some changes at Waverley and Guildford since this item went to the new joint ONS, and so it came up during my strange stint as temporary portfolio holder for environment and sustainability. As both new portfolio holders at Guildford and Waverley have been in office, I think a sum total of 48 hours between them, I asked them if they wouldn't mind me introducing this item, as I think it probably made the most sense. So I'm a bit of a policy nerd, as some of you know, and this is top end policy nerd territory. And I'm very happy that this item has found its way here. Conceptually, I found it extremely interesting as a concept, but also because it does a lot of the things that we need to do to progress parts of the climate emergency forward. So I'm very grateful to our officers, particularly Luke and Delma, and also in finance, Candice and her team for bringing this forward. So Guildford and Waverley have adopted ambitious climate carbon reduction goals. However, our current trajectory suggests we will not meet those goals without further action. So even with our ongoing decarbonisation programme, we will have to do some kind of offsetting or bringing costs without direct benefits. And these costs are expected to rise as demand for offsetting schemes increase as well. So currently, Waverley and Guildford together emit the equivalent of over 10,000 tonnes of CO2 annually. And so without further action, our remaining emissions will need to be offset. So to help tackle this challenge, we're proposing an internal carbon pricing policy. And this assigns a monetary value to carbon emissions, enabling better informed decisions, incentivising those low carbon choices. It reflects the future societal impact of carbon emissions and prepares us for the financial reality of offsetting. The policy could also create a funding stream for future decarbonisation projects, although this is not something that we're proposing right at this point. So by having carbon price into our project planning, we can assess the true cost of carbon emissions right the way end to end. We can evaluate the value of decarbonisation projects in lots of different ways and plan financially for the future of our climate change obligations. Now, introducing a carbon price is also pretty innovative. There aren't many people that have even thought about this, let alone done it. Few have adopted it so far, and there's going to be a few places that are looking at us. And I think certainly Waverley and Guildford establishing this prior to the creation of West Surrey means that West Surrey, I hope, will get a good steer that they need to have a look at this when they kick off as well. So at ONS, there were a number of questions. There were also quite a few misunderstandings. I don't think many of them were deliberate misunderstandings, although there are definitely a few that were. There was a very lengthy discussion. And in summary, that debate focused upon the potential impact on the finance team to process these calculations. Finance confirmed in person that they believed that it would be relatively minimal and certainly something that they could undertake. The debate also addressed the 3 options which are in the report for the calculation of the price. So that's the HM Treasury Green Book greenhouse gas emissions valuations, a market price scheme such as the UK emissions trading standards trading scheme even, or some form of offset. Now, ONS supported the officer recommendation and the recommendation I also moved at that meeting that's before you tonight. And this is largely due to the volatility in general of those market trading schemes the overall ineffectiveness of most of the offset schemes that we've come across so far, and also having a standardised approach that's supported by UK government and is likely to be adopted by others in the form of the Green Book valuation. So as such, it is my pleasure to commend these very interesting recommendations to both executives. And I'm sure one of you can be listed as the seconder from the Guildford side. Vanessa, I saw you first. Right, any speakers before I bring in Councillor Hyman? Adam.
Thank you very much. And yes, even though I've only been in post 48 hours, I've already met Delma and Luke, and I'm very excited by this proposal that has been outlined by yourself, Leader. I think one of the key things is we've only got 4 years before we're in 2030. And if we're being serious about trying to meet our net zero targets, we've got to take more action than we're currently doing. Currently, together, Guildford and Waverley emit over 10,400 tonnes of CO2 annually. And if we're not addressing that, that will increase, particularly if in certain buildings, for example, carbon is not captured. Something as well, which I think is really important, is often a bit like with EDI actually, the environment and sustainability can be seen from a tokenistic lens. Indeed, people might not think how we can sort of make practical changes other than perhaps more obvious recycling and localized activity. So actually creating a metric in this way, I think, allows everybody to understand. And often when projects are seen from purely a financial perspective, this can sort of provide that antidote, if you like, and get them to see that actually when you're comparing inaction or comparing us to continue on the same trajectory with an alternative, the alternative is not that different.
Indeed, and I think just for Guildford members and other officers who weren't present in the room during the previous meeting that took place here, we've asked if this policy passes for the Cranley Leisure Centre Passive House project to effectively have this carbon pricing applied to it so that we can use it as a case study that is very relevant to our area and start to get our heads around what the output from an internal carbon pricing scheme looks like. I've got a hand up from Angela online. Angela.
Thank you. Firstly, apologies for the poor quality of my camera. I look blurred and I don't know why I look blurred. So anyway, I'll have to get that looked into. So good evening, everyone. I agree with everything that's been said so far. I would just like to add that we are going to be offering all councillors some more information and an opportunity to hear more about this at a future date. So watch out for that date in your diary. I think it'll be really useful to include sort of case studies as and when we go along to explain and start bringing this carbon price into life. I also think our communications teams on both sides trying to explain it to everybody in across our communities so they understand what we're doing, and perhaps you know, other local businesses might be able to bring something similar into their organisation. And I sincerely hope that both unitaries, when they come into form, will look at adopting something similar. So it won't just be the East versus the West or anything like that. It's a system across everywhere. And I'll have to go off because the dogs have just heard somebody come in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela. I've got one registered speaker, but I'm also just going to check. George, did you also want to speak on this one while you're here?
Yes, please.
Right, in which case, Jerry, after you, because you did register, and then I'll go to George.
Okay, thanks, Leader. But yes, well, I'm pleased that yes, I am often the only person in the chamber who's putting the point of view of half the residents. That because not all residents, of course, have agree with the policies that we're often putting through the council, and those views need to be made clear. That's what overview and scrutiny is meant to be for. We're there to represent the residents and not our own political dogma. So yes, I'm pleased that often I am the only person who's putting forward the points that need to be made, because the points that need to be made are: is this value for money? Is it good, leading to good decision making? And what's that person doing upside down in the top left corner of my screen? I don't know whether you can see that. The issue with this one here.
Unfortunately, I can't, Jerry.
No, well, there's a lady who's upside down. Oh, it's George. It's Councillor Potter. It's not a lady. It's Councillor Potter's upside down on the screen. You might want to correct that at some point. If I might, at the ONS, my main point was that we should perhaps leave it to the unitaries to decide what system to adopt, because the 4 different options we've got. So there's 3. There's a green book and there's 2 others. They're in your paperwork. And we could have a hybrid. We were going for the government green book one. The figures that you get from each of those are completely different. So at some point we're going to have to, presumably the government, decide what figures we ought to be using. Otherwise, whenever we get a proposal coming to council over the coming year, or perhaps even if our system's then adopted by the unitaries, we are going to be having to ask, what does this figure represent, and is it 300% out? Because there are massive differences between the 40 quid per tonne and the 250 quid a tonne, and the different rates which we were given a choice of. So to some extent, like we have with Cranley Leisure Centre earlier. Apologies to the Guildford members there who don't know about the Cranley Leisure Centre perhaps, but when we're put in front of us numbers which actually end up being completely different to what we're going to end up with, we need reliable figures put in front of us as councillors to make good decisions. This is about good decision making, and my concern here is we're asking our staff to put numbers in front of us which, quite frankly, we're either going to have to question or dismiss because there are, as a choice of a number of different figures, we don't know what it really ought to be. We have enough trouble with believing the figures we got in front of us at the moment, and I just think by compounding it, do we need to do this now? No, we don't. Shouldn't we be getting on with more important things? Probably. And I think, a number of our residents, I know, take that point of view, that this is the sort of thing really where, unless we're getting something meaningful out of it and something that's useful, and the figures won't be, that's the problem with this, then, perhaps we shouldn't be doing it yet. Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in George and then I'll come back to the room. George. Apologies, George. Your camera, I think, was doing some fun things, which caused some minor chuckling in the room. But after you, George.
Yes, thank you. I was just going to, again, I'm going to turn the camera off because it's still causing problems. I just wanted to know, as a starting point, that I am fully in favour of this. I think this is a really exciting opportunity for Guildford and Waverley to be national pioneers and to set an example that many councils around the country will be very interested in. And crucially, to do work which will be immensely useful to the new unitary as it tackles climate change. I think it's also worth reiterating that the concerns expressed by Councillor Hyman were also, of course, expressed at the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And I think a point I made there, the point I will make again, of course, is that the climate emergency features prominently in the corporate strategies of both Waverley and Guildford, something that was democratically adopted by the vast majority of democratically elected councillors in line with the priorities that residents have demonstrated at the ballot box. The political minority are, of course, entitled to express their opposition to something they disagree with, but I think it is worth noting that the people have spoken very loudly on this very consistently over a prolonged period of time, and they clearly do want action for climate emergency. This, as we discussed at the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee, this measure as a trial is not onerous. It does not force us to do anything in terms of decision making. It merely gives us more information to aid in decision making, and we can still exercise our judgment on it on decision making as councillors. Again, I don't know further to say, but I'm very pleased to see this work coming forwards. I know that the entire climate team across both councils have worked very hard on this. As a former portfolio holder for this area and as a current member of Guildford Climate Change Board, I really cannot understate the importance of this. It's been really great to hear such warm support from executive members on both sides this evening. I think I will just say that on a personal note, I do think it's a real shame that the former Guildford portfolio holder for climate change, Councillor Houston, who did so much to progress this work, is no longer able to be here to present the outcome of that work.
You, George.
But I'm sure but it is very important work nonetheless. So thank you.
Thank you, George.
Is that time?
Yep, there we go. That's time.
Thank you.
I'll take going forward that a councillor's picture upside down means they're in distress. So if you've got that again, let me know. I'll come to Liz.
Thank you, Leader. And just in answer to a couple of things that Jerry raised, this is a trial. I am really supportive of it, really excited by it. I've already told the team about it of the Cranley Leisure Centre, sent them a quick email to let them know. So I'm sure they're thrilled I've given them more work to do. But, you know, when I first came to the council here, I was talking about triple bottom line accounting and also cradle to cradle design. And, you know, as for speaking for residents, you know, there are a lot of residents that are really concerned about the environment. I'm really concerned about, you know, our carbon emissions. And it's not about political dogma. For me, it is about trying to protect our environment, protect it against, you know, we have extreme weather events, we have rising sea levels, all of this costs money. But equally, it costs people their livelihoods, it costs people their homes. You know, it's really important that we do our bit because everybody doing their bit really makes a difference. And, you know, I think that there is nothing more important than our environment. We can't exist without it. So we do need to try and protect it. If people think that this is, you know, something that they can do without, then they only have to, you know, look at the news and see the extreme weather events recently we've seen in the Caribbean, we were talking about earlier. You know, it's really important that we don't carry on with, I'm afraid to say, with the approach of some politicians that want to ignore this and go hell for leather for growth and to ignore the impact that we're having on our environment. I fully support this. I'm surprised that Jerry, who's usually going on about habitats, is not supportive of this. You know, I find that, you know, a little bit difficult to understand. But, you know, protecting our environment for the next generation is one of the most important things that we can do.
An example I usually give in these sort of discussions is the flood barriers installed at Catchall Lane in Godalming, which were put up to defend against 1 in 100 or 1 in 80 year floods. I'm sure either the two rivers would remind me of the correct one. That has been deployed 5 times in the last 6 years because the rains have increased, the flood waters have increased around that area, and we continuously get knock-on flooding, even as recently as this evening at Waycourt down in Catchall off that lane. So other than the fact that almost all of us were here, and not just here, but in Guildford and in most of what we're going to soon call West Surrey, most of the councillors that were elected in those authorities ran on some level of climate change mandate to do something about it. And even if you don't care about the environment, the levels of cost that all local authorities will be exposed to if they are unprepared for climate change is already measurable and will certainly increase. And with that, Mark.
Well, thank you, Paul. I've got not only a personal but also a professional interest in this because I think I as an accountant, my institute struggles with this. And I am really looking forward to seeing a trial of this, you know, at the sharp end in the trenches at a council, because I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to not only learn how to do it ourselves, but deliver something that other councils will be able to follow. I am proud of the fact that Waverley has not only the appetite, but the ability and the resources and the space to be able to do this. And I'm absolutely thrilled to bits. I want to echo what Liz said, what George said. This is a trial. You know, this is still an evolving science dealing with, you know, these metrics and dealing with this. But I'm absolutely thrilled that we're in a position and that we're actually doing something. For me, this is the essence of value for money. This is what value for money actually means. It doesn't mean scraping the barrel looking for efficiencies, promising efficiencies that don't actually exist when you may even know that they don't exist. And on behalf of the residents of Badshot, Lee and Moore Park, I want to take issue with some of the things that Jerry said. Jerry's entitled to his opinion and he's entitled to express his opinion. What he's not entitled to do is project that opinion on the residents who elected me to represent them and not him. And I take great exception to Jerry taking it for granted that when he speaks for everybody, because he does not.
like a great many in this room, I've been elected now 3 times in this borough, and every single time I have stressed climate change credential and have pledged to do more on it. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm very much keeping with what residents elected me to do in my personal capacity as a councillor, but also as leader of this council. I think the only downside for you is that you all are almost certainly going to have to lecture your own institute on it when the time comes. I'm sure they'll call on you to be the one doing that. So, any other speakers? Have I missed anybody? No, I don't think so. In which case then, moving on to the recommendations, are the recommendations set out in the report, agenda item 5, agreed? Wonderful, everyone. And with that, at 20:38, I believe I can close the meeting. Thank you, everyone.